I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Jeff Gibbard. Now, he is formerly known as the world's most handsome social media and content marketing strategist. However, he also is the author of The Lovable Leader, a professional speaker, and the founder of several companies, including Super Productive and the Superhero Institute, a certification program for coaches that want to help their clients grow revenue and unlock their potential to make a positive impact on the world. Jeff is also the host of his own popular podcast called Shareable. In this interview, we discuss his upbringing and how his father being a funeral director and his mother being tech savvy influenced his own journey as a creative entrepreneur and strategist. It means so much that you support this podcast each time that we launch an episode and have these guests on that tell their story. We hope that you will share, subscribe, leave a comment on how this episode was helpful to you and how not that it just only impacted you, but maybe changed just a little bit something in the way that you think about things or you interact, or created a different type of energy with the people around you. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, and I'm so excited today to be with Jeff Gibbard. And Jeff, did you want to start off and just give the audience a little background on yourself and who you are?
Sure. So I'm a speaker, strategist, and a coach, and most commonly I go by Superhero as my title. So what I do is I own a company called Super Impactful, and all of the work that I do is geared towards helping people make a more meaningful impact in the ways that are important to them. So I help people escape their job if they want to, so they can start their own thing, or I work with people that want to stay and help them make good trouble so they can do some meaningful disruption in their companies. I wrote a book called The Lovable Leader. I'm a podcaster. I'm a blogger. I have ADHD. I'm autistic. I do a lot of different stuff. I'm all over the place. So it's always difficult to give like a concise answer, but I'm a man of many interests and many passions, and I just try to help other people do the same.
Yeah, I think it's the speaker way of life of just doing a bunch of different things, right? Yep. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, exactly. Never boring.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here today. And I just love to really start not with what you do today, but where you came from. So if you want to just give us a little background, where did you grow up? What did your parents do for a living? What was fun for you when you were little?
Yeah. I think this is such a good way to start off because it really does contextualize each of your guests. I've listened to a bunch of your episodes, and it's always interesting when you look at the title and then you hear someone's backstory, right? So I grew up in Long Island, New York. I was an only child, and my dad was a funeral director, and my mom did a lot of different stuff. She was like an OG computer user, like very early, like a lot of like the Microsoft DOS and all that sort of stuff. So we grew up in a like very kind of techie household in the early days. But yeah, my dad was a funeral director, and I wanted to be a professional basketball player for my early life. And then when that didn't work out, I tried to be a world famous movie director. I wanted to be like Stanley Kubrick or Quentin Tarantino or whatever. Yeah. And then when that didn't work out, one thing led to another. I tried this, I tried that. I wound up going back to school, got my graduate degree. And then I started my own business in 2011 after realizing I just cannot hold down a job. That is just not who I am. I wasn't built for it, wasn't designed for it.
Oh, so let's go back to your dad, because that's hugely fascinating. It brought me back to a memory. In my first job, I was an auditor. So I'm a CPA by trade. And one of my first audits was a funeral home company. And how they would name things was always interesting on the financial statement reports, like pre-need or at need, to not say that someone was before death or dead.
Yeah.
So like just getting used to the whole thing and just understanding what they did without it being so emotional. So growing up with that in your background, I'd just love to understand, how'd your dad get into it and what was your perception of that?
So this is probably in my backstory, the most meaningful detail, honestly. So there's a couple pieces of it. One, my dad grew up in upstate Albany. He was adopted. His father passed away young. His mother like ran away. So it was him and his brother adopted by their aunt and uncle. And he grew up in a time where like the standard advice was you grow up, you go to school, maybe you go to college, but more likely you just go to some sort of a trade, you get a good union job, you get married, you have kids, you retire, you pass away, or like pay your taxes, right? Like that was very much the path. So when at the age that he grew up, basically because he wasn't going to college, when Vietnam broke out, he basically knew like, well, my number's going to get called because I fit the demographic of people who are going to get drafted. So he chose instead to enlist so that he could choose what he did. And what he chose to do was body retrieval. So he basically was the guy who showed up after all of the fighting. Well, he wanted to stay out of harm's way.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, it was a pretty good survival strategy, right? So he did that. And naturally then coming out of Vietnam, when he got back, he naturally decided, well, I kind of already have the skill set. He went to like embalming school. He did all the things they did. And, he went into funeral directing. And then at some point along the way, he met my mom. At some point they had me, and I look back at my dad and I remember him waking up early or coming home late and all of his working overtime, but he did all of that so that he could provide, but also he did things in such a way where he could structure his time so he could be home when I got home from school, so we could play catch, so that we could hang out. And that really like impacted me, that he made these decisions to be around for me. He was always around. I had such a tight relationship with him. But also I saw that he did this thing that he didn't love. Like he wasn't like passionate about, funeral directing. Like that wasn't his thing. And he always said to me, I think it was Confucius who originally said this, but find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And he said that to me very, very early in life. And it just stuck in my head. And I couldn't ever let go of it because I saw him doing what he did without passion or purpose or excitement. And he wanted me to have a different life than that. So I always felt it was a bit of like an obligation, like a bit of a duty to him that he went through all that he went through so that I could have the opportunity to choose what I wanted to do and do something that makes me happy. And I've consistently done that come hell or high water. And whether or not it worked out or not, I kept going that path. And I finally arrived at a place where I can. But that's a lot because of him. And I would say the other part of that, just real quick, is that being around someone who's always around death, you're very keenly aware of the fragility of life and our own mortality, and that like, you don't have much time here really. And you never know when your number's getting called. So because of that, I just found myself very much in like I'm going to do what I can with the time that I have here to make sure it's impactful.
Yes. Yeah. I'm also wondering, when you think about that job of being a funeral director, there is a lot of purpose in the healing that you're giving to those families. And so did you ever see him interacting as the funeral director? And what was your observations of the people around him?
So one, I'll tell you, if you ever want to like just laugh your butt off, hang out with funeral directors. They're like the most twisted, hilarious people. Like all of the people he worked with.
You have to be, right?
Absolutely hilarious. Yeah. And like you have to have like a dark sense of humor. It was a thing. I did see him. I went to work with him a lot. I have far more clear memories of going to work with him than I did going to work with my mom. And it was because she bounced around a lot. Like he had the same job his entire career, basically.
Right.
But I saw him interact with people, and, he took his job very seriously. So I saw how he presented, I'm sure, the impact he made on people. And I know that like when he had friends who had family or friends that passed away, like he would like basically like give away his commission to like hook up the people that, that were coming to him, because it wasn't about the money. It was about like trying to do right by the people in his circle. And he was very like insular. Like he didn't have a big network of friends, but if you were like on his inside, you were his people, and he would do whatever for you. So on the one hand, I know that he took it seriously, and I know that he worked hard, and I know all of that, but I also know the backside of it, where we would just chat over dinner. We would, talk about life. And I know how he felt about the job. Like, I know that for him, he was like, this is like my lot in life. This is what I'm doing, but I do it because I want to be able to provide for family. I want to be able to, do all those things. So, I did see him provide comfort, and I know that he had that skill and he could turn it on. He was a very compassionate and empathetic person to begin with, but the bigger lesson was, life's short, do something that makes you happy. And, if you can from the very start, try and go find something that doesn't feel like work.
Yeah. And, a lot of times when I'm working with people or, leaders trying to just figure out what their purpose is and what they do, because we all, just like your dad, so many people choose what they do based on what they know or what they're good at. Right. Like, so he was already good at that skill. So he went into that as a career. But I do think we overlook, because that purpose of, maybe I don't love what I do every day, that this is just what I'm good at. But my purpose is it provides me the flexibility to be with my son every day. It provides me the type of life that I can give my family. And sometimes we lose sight of that important piece of it, and we get so stuck in the drudgery of maybe not loving every minute of our day, but not necessarily looking at the purpose behind everything else it gave you, which is it sounds huge.
Yeah, there's a post that floats around the internet that falsely attributes this philosophy to Charles Schultz, the creator of Peanuts, Charlie Brown and everything, that talks about like this idea of like, you probably can't name the last Nobel Prize winners. You probably can't name the last Oscar winners, but you can probably name a teacher that made an impact on you, and probably can think about a family friend or something like that. And I really like this idea of little moments, day-to-day interactions that are big impact. And I think when we talk about purpose, there's kind of like, there's a lot of ways to look at it. And a lot of the work that I do, I'm trying to help people to think about purpose on a really, really grand scale. But a lot of the purpose could be those grand scales on your day-to-day life, right? Like, how can you impact your child's life in like this remarkably profound way by how you show up as a role model for them, how you spend time with them, how you're present with them, how you structure your career so that you have that time to be present with them. That is one side of it. The other side of it is kind of the bigger, broader purpose, this idea of like, you only have this much time here. What are you going to do with that time? And it's everybody's choice how they're going to answer that. But for me, I know that, looking back on my story, there's the fact that my dad was a funeral director, and that very much kind of put in my mind this idea of purpose in this kind of longer timeline, this idea of like, you have this window here, but time will exist after you, and there was time before you. So I always kind of tried to think about like, well, what could I do that would make the biggest possible impact with the life that I have? Something I could feel really proud of about my contribution, to this world. And that was reinforced actually by another incident that happened in my life, which is that on my last day of high school, my mother got into a catastrophic car accident with it's a company called God, Guaranteed Overnight Delivers, tractor trailer.
Oh my gosh, that was really.
She got hit by God. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Kind of ridiculous, right? So it like rips off the side of her Jeep. She has this traumatic brain injury. She manages to live through like 9 hours in the operating room. But it was my last day of high school. Like in a flash, I took the car that morning. She came and picked it up during lunch. And like we met at like for pizza. I gave her the car. She was going to get stuff for my graduation party. And then that happened. And it makes you think like seconds. Right. Seconds is all it took for it to be her and not somebody else. Or for someone for not to have happened at all. Right. So it really is always never lost on me that we don't know when our moment is. Right. And for me, that just inspires me to try and think about how can I make the biggest impact for the most number of people. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do that. That's right. Like not the thing when I'm in like the conversation around purpose, but I do think everyone has to would do well to think about and take time to think about what is their purpose. Like, what's the thing that really drives them, that makes them excited? It could be spending that time with somebody. It could be finding something they enjoy. It could be that they don't have to like what they do for work, because that's not important to them. It matters how they spend their time outside of work. So everybody's got to kind of figure that out if they want to have the best possible life. At least that's my philosophy on it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And everybody makes their small impacts or large impacts. There's no comparing, right? Like your dad might have thought it was small impacts, and look at how that carried forward.
Absolutely.
All the things you're doing to help impact other people because of the examples of your parents as well. So your mom, you said she was into computers. What did she do as far as that?
So she worked for Grant Thornton.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
the accounting, right?
Yeah.
So she worked for them. She worked for Olympus for a little bit and a couple of different companies, but she was doing like, God, I don't even know, honestly, because like I know there was a lot to do with DOS and early Windows, like Windows 3.1 and Windows 95. It was like, that's what she was doing. And she did that for a little while, worked in the city and came home late and was always miserable and always burnt out. But she always went from thing to thing to thing, got laid off a bunch of times. And like, here he was working this union job, did it for his whole life. She went from job to job, got laid off. And then she decided to start her own thing. She was an electrologist, where like the zapping hair, eyebrows, mustaches, any of those things. She did that at home for a little bit after my parents split and she got remarried. That was the thing that she did. So yeah, she did a bunch of different stuff. And I think that kind of impressed upon me that like job security is an illusion. That like, if somebody else gets to decide whether you have a job or not, it's not really job security. And I've always felt like I have the best job security in the world, because all I have to do is keep being me, being honest, being authentic, being good at what I do, and finding people who need that. And I have tons of clients always at any disposal because I have solutions to people's problems. And none of them get to be the sole reason why I'm employed or not.
Right. And I think that too, that whole entrepreneurial, like I feel like it's just something in your soul. Like you're either like that or not like that. You can be taught entrepreneurial skills, but like just being willing to take those risks, and also even in your hardest times, like your mom, losing her jobs or whatever, having faith that you can support yourself, you can get back on your feet. That's such an important thing that you don't realize, your children are watching or, and so forth.
Yeah, totally. I'm not sure if I think that entrepreneurialism is like baked into you. I do think there are certain factors that some people have that make it easier for them. I think, if you're risk averse, entrepreneurialism is a little more tough.
Right.
If you are singularly focused on one thing, it becomes a little tougher because you kind of need to master a lot of different skills, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. So, okay. And then you said you were a basketball player.
Yeah. So I wanted to be a professional basketball player, but I played a lot in high school. And you know what? I'll tell you the very quick version of this story, but because it's the first time I've ever told the story on any podcast or anywhere, but so I got cut from, when I tried out in, freshman year, I got put on the junior varsity team. Sophomore year, I got cut. And junior year, I went in, I was ready. So I had like hustled and played all off season. I was like ready. I came in ready to play. And as I remembered it, I went in and I crushed it at playoffs, like in tryouts, that is. I went in and I like really, I crushed like every tryout, but I didn't get put on the team. And it broke my heart. And it was at that point that I kind of gave up on the dream of basketball. And for years, my entire adult life, I carried with me this kind of like, maybe you can't do everything you set your mind to. And like, maybe I wasn't as good as I thought. And maybe I just had an inflated self. Anywho, 4 months ago, I wake up one morning to a random Facebook message. And the random Facebook message was from a kid who was a senior at the same time that I was a junior. And he basically, in long story short, beautiful, long Facebook message, he basically was like, my daughter was trying out for this team and I wanted to give her a lesson. And I essentially told the story about how you came in and you dragged our asses up and down the court and you were the best player on the court. And for some reason, the coach didn't put you on. So you can't control everything, whether the coach puts you on or not, but you can control your effort. So, put the effort in like Jeff did. And I was like, what, that you remember? That's how you remember? And And he was like,
awesome.
oh, no. Like we all talked about it. All the seniors, we all talked about it. Like the coach came and was like, go lock up Jeff Gibbard. Like, show us if that kid actually did improve. And he was like, you gassed me. He was like, you dragged me up and down the court. And I was like, I cannot believe that that's actually what happened. And it wasn't just a figment of my imagination, but it was so validating. And it like all of the trauma of that,
Isn't that crazy?
Thing just lifted. It was a movie moment. Like nobody gets this. Like if you read the message, it is like, it's like, it's from a script. It's beautiful. So
he might have assumed that you already knew that.
No, so it's funny. So I started crying after I got it because it was it was heavy. Yeah. And I was like, I need a minute to respond to it. And he was actually like, yo, I'm so sorry. Like I should have thought that might have been like a different kind of memory for you. Like I just remembered it. And like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to be a thing. I was like, no, this is great. This is like the best thing you could have done for me. Like, please don't apologize. I just need a minute with it.
Isn't that amazing how you carry those things with you for so long? Yeah. I played violin growing up, and there was this orchestra I wanted to get into, and the conductor just hated me. I don't know why. He just like, I'd play and he just get this look on his face. Like, and everywhere else I'd get this like positive reaction. And I don't know how much you know about classical music, but it was like my freshman year of high school, and I still didn't get into this orchestra, and I really wanted to get in the next year. So I'm working my butt off. And I was at the symphony one night, and my mom said, well, what about viola? And I'm like, viola? Like, so viola's like,
yeah. It's like the in between. It's violin, viola, cello.
It never
bass.
gets any attention. Yeah. And so I was like, as a violinist, I'm like, well, I mean, what do you mean? And then I sat there quiet, and I was like, interesting. And then by the end of the symphony, I was like, yeah, I'm going to pick up viola. And the next year I got in. He
right on.
Stood up and said, that's your instrument, which actually kind of hurt my feelings.
Yeah. You're like, I wanted to be that. It turns out wasn't.
Same kind of, like, it was like, okay, like sometimes your route isn't where you think, like you've got to find another way to accomplish your goal. And I think what's cool is when, like, just like your dad, when something you do actually got used as an example for another generation.
Yep.
That's even more validating than, the whole experience of getting.
Yeah, totally. Cause like, as like a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, like I wasn't thinking like, oh, one day one of these kids is going to tell their daughter, their 10-year-old daughter about how I worked in the off season. Like that wasn't a thought. Yeah. So it's wild. Like it got me thinking. I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate this into one of the talks that I do, but about how essentially like you just can only control the effort you put into it, but you never know the kind of impact you're going to have on people. I have this idea called Little Moments, Big Impact for a talk that I'm going to be working on, but I might fit that in there.
Yeah. Well, I had a podcast with a good friend of mine, James Leith, and he what he does is he's a coach's coach. So he trains coaches to understand their impact on their players and so forth. But he has a story where he went out for the volleyball team and he was actually not good. And, but he just kept going out there and he kept going out there, and he was for sure he wasn't going to get on the team. And then he ends up getting on, and he like talked to the coach, like, how did I make it? And the coach was opposite of that coach for whatever reason, why your coach didn't want to put you on the team. But his coach basically said, the fact that you keep getting up and motivated and having that attitude affects the whole entire team. So I want you on.
That's
here.
What's up. Yeah. Same thing about the trajectory of my life had that been the kind of coach I had.
I know. Like, it's so right.
It's like ridiculous. Yeah.
And that is like so important, the impact people have on your life. Like, and like, we have to be so careful with whatever biases we're holding, because who knows what that coach's issue was with you.
Yeah.
But he had all that power in his hand, right?
Yeah. It's kind of brutal to think about.
So when that didn't work out for you, where did you pivot?
So do you mean the basketball thing?
Yeah,
or like,
the basketball. Yeah.
So after that, I was kind of like, all right, we'll pick the next passion. I was like, I really like movies. Maybe I want to make movies. So then immediately my brain went to like, well, what's the So to start with the basketball thing, it wasn't I wanted to be a professional basketball. I wanted to be the starting point guard for the Knicks and break the assist record. Like it was like it wasn't like, oh, like it would be cool if I could ride it was like I always thought the next big thing.
Yeah.
So when I thought about making movies, I thought, well, I want to win Oscars for best director. Like that was kind of where, and I thought I want to make, culturally iconic movies that like withstand the test of time, like that shape how people see the world. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that was how I saw movies at the time. I went to Temple in Philadelphia for that. So I wound up in Philly and wound up doing that, realizing that, at the time I went, it was like the bridge between analog film to digital video and from analog photography to digital photography. So I wound up actually shifting away from film because it was just really difficult to make any films at that stage as the transition was happening. All the computers were really, really slow. It took like 3 hours to basically like render like a 3-minute clip. It's just like how far the technology has come is mind blowing to me now.
It is.
So I did that and I decided to actually start doing photography because I took a photography class and I was like, this is amazing. I could tell a story in a single frame.
Yeah.
So from there, I decided that I wanted to travel the world and take pictures of, I wanted to like be a Sports Illustrated model, swimsuit model photographer. Cause I was a 20-something-year-old dude. That was obviously the best job in the world to me. And that idea vaporized.
I love how like clearly defined you are in your goal.
Every part of it was very clearly defined. And then after that, just in keeping with the theme, I decided, well, I love cooking and I know how to cook really well. So I'm actually going to start an in-home fine dining personal private chef service that's going to revolutionize in-home fine dining starting in Philadelphia and then spreading across the country. So like, again, think small all times. And I had the whole idea very clearly planned out. I knew where I wanted to have my open kitchen that would basically supply all the cooks that would drive around. And this was like pre-iPhone, mind you. This is like pre-BlackBerry. This is like flip phone and MySpace era. And like, if even that. So I was like way ahead of the curve for like what DoorDash and Grubhub and all that have kind of become, although that's more coming delivery food anyway.
Right.
So anyway, that was what I tried to do. And then when that failed, I was a bartender and a waiter for like 5, 6, 7 years, just trying to figure out like who I wanted to be, kind of feeling like, oh, maybe everything's horrible. And maybe I'll never get what I want. And then I went back, got my MBA, and that kind of just got me out of the rut and back into like doing stuff. And I came out around the same time that social media was really taking shape. And I started a social media agency that I ran from 2011 through 2017 when I got acquired. I was at that company for about 1.5 years, and then I left to start doing superhero stuff. But the kind of period in between after my MBA and starting my agency, I held down 2 jobs. I had one at a consulting firm for like 2 years-ish, and I was miserable after about 6 months, but I somehow managed to stick it out for another 1.5 years. And then I went to a PR firm to be the director of social media. And that was like my big break. And I sat in a cubicle and everything was horrible and I hated it. And the first day I got out, I had a client. So they laid me off and I brought one of my clients with me because he insisted. And I was like, cool. So I have a client. I'll start my business. So I started a business. My very first day working for myself, I immediately felt different. Like I could feel every cell in my body vibrating at a different frequency. I felt alive. I felt excited. I felt motivated. I felt creative. I felt free. Everything felt good. And even when I've struggled in my own business, it has felt 1,000,000 times better than the best I've ever felt at any company where I had a job or a boss, God forbid.
So have you ever, just curious, because your dad was so stable in a job, has that ever bothered you? And I know he told you, to do what you love, but I didn't know if that was like why.
Yeah, not once. Not once did it ever bother me that I couldn't hold down a job. Not once, because I just didn't like it. Like I just did not ever like I was like, who are you to tell me what to do? I'm smart and creative. Like I don't need your permission to do something smart and creative. And apparently you do need their permission to do something smart and creative. Exactly. But in my own business, I don't need anybody's permission. I just do stuff and it either works or it doesn't. I get to live and die with that. And I appreciate the accountability that comes with making my own decisions and living with the results of it, as opposed to being confined to the imagination of the people who employ me. And as someone whose brain is going at all times with ideas and with things that I want to work on and creative projects and, what people pay me for, is this brain, is the brain that is able to see patterns in what people are talking about, to see the things that people aren't saying, to ask the questions that pull out valuable information. I just have never had the opportunity to do that at a company. And even if I did, even if I could find a company that would allow me all of those things, they would be reaping the primary benefits of all of that talent, of all that effort, of all, and they would want me to do all of these other things that I'm not good at. So like, for instance, I've, before I even came on this show, I made it a point that I really wanted to say this to you. Your profession, the profession that you hang out in and that you do, accountants, that world, you are my singular example of like, do what you do well and bring in people who do the things you don't do well. I could never, ever, 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 ever be an accountant. I couldn't. Yeah. I'm really good at creating a single spreadsheet and a budget. And if it's mine and it's like the way I want it, I could do it, but I could never, ever do it consistently because consistency isn't baked into this brain.
Right.
So I just really appreciate that you do what you do and that folks like you do what you do. And my accountant is like one of the most important people in my life. And
I think that's important for anybody, whether you're the accountant that needs, someone like you, and is that you're willing to invest in wherever you have gaps.
Yep.
Right. Because, you can't be hard on yourself. All brains are not equal and they shouldn't be, else this world wouldn't operate the way that it does. So it's important to really know what you're good at and really know where to invest so that you can keep being good at what you're good at.
100%. And I'll tell you the model that I use to think about it. This might be helpful for people listening, is when I think about whether or not to hire someone, I think, what would it take for me to learn how to do this? And then how much time would it take for me to do this well, do this consistently? And then I try to quantify that versus like what I could sell my time for otherwise. Right. So if I could do a coaching engagement for, $250, $500, $750, $1,000 for that hour, if I were to take that hour and do my accounting, do my taxes, would it be worth it? Probably not. Right. So if the money that I pay to my accountant to get all of those things done in both the time, the money, the opportunity cost that I would be wasting, the money that I could make with that time instead, but also all of the frustration of learning the skill that I'm not particularly excited about.
Right.
It makes perfect sense. I gladly write that check. I'm like, there you go. Thank you for being you. In the same way that but a lot of people who would hire someone like me often will talk to someone like me and think I should be able to do that thing that he does. And it's like, no, but you just can't. My brain is designed for this. So, and yours is not. And if you wanted to learn everything I know about brand or leadership or culture or marketing or sales, like I'll give you the reading list, but like, I'll talk to you in 10 years. Like it's going to take you a while. You might as well just hire me and we'll get it done.
Right. Yeah. So as far as your movie making abilities and what you learned, how have you used that in the work that you do?
It's so funny the way that our job history, like our career history and our interests, like kind of come back.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you one example before that, which is that I worked at Banana Republic and Express in my like late teens. I was like in retail, right? Yeah. And I can tell you my closet is immaculate. Like everything is folded perfectly. My jeans have I know the difference between a flat front fold and a jean fold. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I know what I'm doing there. So that has come back, right? So the movie making, it's funny because when I was in film school, I was like, this will never be useful. This is like this is the dumbest degree I could have gotten. Film and media arts, like give me a break. Okay. Turns out media literacy is incredibly important right now. Being able to understand how the media can shape our opinions by the use of their words, their framings, what they choose to show, what they choose not to show, incredibly vital. The fact that at some point in my life, social media became a thing and video started taking off. You have TikTok, you have Reels, you have Facebook, you have YouTube. Okay, well, what's a really valuable skill now? Understanding lighting, understanding sound, understanding how to frame a shot, understanding editing in its basic form, understanding transitions. These are all things that I use in creating video content. I also use it when I'm on stage and I'm doing speeches. So when I put up together a keynote, I'm thinking theatrically about how can I craft this experience. And when I do virtual, thanks to COVID, now there's so many virtual presentations, I now have to think about, well, how do I take what was a stage presentation and how do I fit it into this little box? How do I make it so that this experience, I think about that experience, how can I make that theatrical or engaging relative to the format and how people tend to think when they're looking at screens? So all of these skills kind of came together and actually wound up being very useful. When I do speeches, I have to think about, the flow of the story, right? That's storytelling. I actually went to school to do screenwriting. That was my primary thing. I wrote a lot of plays and movies when I was coming out of high school. So telling stories and putting together, what's happening in that story, kind of like speaking and writing visually. That's a thing that I use all the time now. I'm a podcaster. I do that. So yeah, it's all come back to be useful.
Isn't it interesting? It's your viola. It's your other path of using the
100%.
same thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All of it. All of it's come together. And I use a lot of movie references and things. So
yeah, exactly. So where the superheroes come from?
So the superheroes have been like a lifetime theme. So when I was a kid, I always had a red towel tied around my neck and a Superman shirt on. I was like obsessed with Superman. And yeah, so I was just like really into superheroes my whole life as a kid, like the whole Superman thing. I remember I was real little kid and my parents put a TV in my room because I always stayed up late and I didn't like to go to sleep. So they just put a TV in there and they're like, we need to sleep, watch the TV.
Yeah.
I remember watching an old Superman TV show, like the old one, and Krypton exploding. And I was like, oh my God, all those people died. Is the earth going to explode? I had like this whole epiphany. Anyway, there's so many points throughout my life that were studded by moments of superhero media. And, when the first Spider-Man movie came out, at that point I had like this kind of like very weird arachnophobia sort of thing going on where like I just didn't really like spiders. They freaked me out. And then I saw Spider-Man. I was like, oh my God, spiders are really cool. So now I have this really complex relationship where I still think they're creepy, but now I think they're cool because Spider-Man's the coolest superhero in the entire world. So it's like that was an example of me turning a fear into a strength. Which is your favorite
Spider-Man?
Oh, of the movies? So I would have to say that Andrew Garfield's in The Amazing Spider-Man is my favorite combination of both being Spider-Man and being Peter Parker. I think he does the best job relative to the comic runs that I have tended to read. I love Tom Holland. Like, don't get me wrong, like Homeboy is amazing. And Toby is my original. So like, I love all of them. But if I had to pick one that I would like to see, like, I guess I wouldn't like to see him come back and continue. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but like Tom Holland should be the guy now because he's the guy. But like Andrew Garfield would have been very much someone I would have liked to have seen continue.
Yeah. Interesting. So how do you use that in the work that you're doing since it's a big part of your brand? Yeah.
So the whole superhero theme is present in everything I do. So every company I have, everything that I do kind of begins with super. So Super Impactful is my parent company. I have a company called Super Productive, which is we set up Asana, Monday, Notion, different productivity workspaces, and we do it in a neuro-inclusive way. I have projects that are kind of on deck that I'm going to be building. There's the Superhero Institute and Super Creative Studio. I have a online resource store called the Supermarket. My blog is called Becoming Superhuman. So like literally everything is superhero related. And the idea behind that is I think every one of us has something that is unique and extraordinary about us. We all have a superpower. It could be something as simple as like, we know how to be there for someone when they need us, like in a situation where they're not feeling right. Like we have the ability to be empathetic and listen to them. Like that's a superpower. Maybe you're really good at sales, or maybe you're really good with numbers. Maybe you're really athletic, but we all have these unique abilities. And we have the ability to then learn the path of learning more abilities. Like we can grow and we can become better at all sorts of things in whatever ways we're interested in and that we have the capacity to do. But it's when we take our abilities and we put them towards making the world a kinder, safer, more equitable place, when we apply those abilities towards heroism, towards making the world better, and we do it in community rather than just like, I'm going to save everyone, but we do it like together to try and make a better world. That's superheroism. And that's ultimately what I want to see in the world is more of us doing things that make life not so tough for people, especially people that don't have the same advantages. So we should just be trying to create a world where there's no losing. There can be winning, but there shouldn't be any losing. So the superheroism, where that comes in business and in the work that I do, is it's a lot around encouraging people to create spaces that are more inclusive and more equitable. It's about giving people the freedom to be creative, do work that's joyful, and, just generally not being miserable. So yeah, those are a lot of the things where it comes in.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. This has been fascinating. I've loved your story. So I'd like to end each podcast where you just pick a category. So family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Family and friends.
Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I want to have with my family and friends.
don't have. I guess I would say greater presence, not so much like phone in hand. And part of it is just when I'm tired, it's a lot easier to just like zonk out a bit than like to be really, really present. And one thing that I would want more of, I mean, I'm not present, but I just wish I was more present. I have a going to be 4-year-old and about a 1.5-year-old. And there are just times where it's like, they want to play and I'm like, I've been working all day. Like, I'm just exhausted. Like a lot of time I try to get down on the ground and play ice cream with them or whatever. But like, there's times where it's like, daddy just needs a nap for a second.
I know. It's so hard. Yeah. Those ages are fun and hard.
Yeah. It's a good time though. I like it.
Things or actions I do have that I want to keep with my family and friends.
Family and friends. Words of affirmation. I am really joyful of the fact that like we are a family that really, and friends, that we tell each other how we feel. Like I have a number of guy friends that when we sign off talking to one another, we're like, love you, man. Like it's very openly like, hey, I love you, man. I hope you're doing well. Like it's very appreciative of one another. And I try to let all of my friends know how important they are to me. It sometimes it's tough with the ADHD because the object impermanence, I just forget anything exists. It's not right in front of me. But when, every day that I see my kids, every day that I see my wife, I tell my wife that she's beautiful every day, at least 3 times. I tell my kids that I love them with the force of 1,000 exploding suns at least once every other day. So like, I think that's something I'm glad to continue. And I hope that I never stop doing that, even if it annoys them.
Yeah, I love it. Things or actions I don't have that I don't want
I don't have that I don't want. God, I would say like, I don't know the right phrase for it, but like, I don't want to like lose everything and have all of us, what I mean? Like I'd like to keep being mildly responsible with our funds and with our lifestyles. And, I don't have intense struggles right now. I'm very fortunate for a variety of different reasons that, things are pretty good. And I would not want that to change. So I don't want to have intense struggles, and I'm perfectly fine with, I mean, there are struggles, but like, we're good with the level we have.
Exactly.
We're all right. We'll just maintain here. Okay.
Like, don't bother us. We're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last one, things or actions that I do have that I don't want. So I want to get rid of.
Things or actions. I mean, God, I would love a cheaper mortgage on that side of things. That I do have that I don't want. Man, that's a tough one because I honestly, like, I feel very fortunate. I have a lot of what I want, and I don't have too many things that I don't want. We've had a lot of loss this year, so I'm kind of good not having any more of that. Yeah, I can't think of anything honestly because everything that I do have, I think I want. You know what? Clutter. There we go. I would love to get rid of some of them. I'm a minimalist by like design. Clutter makes me very anxious because of my brain. And there's a lot of clutter in the house. So we do have that, and I do not want it. I would love for everything in every part of the house to be neat and organized and in order. And like all of the forks that are in the fork drawer are the same fork, like that thing, that and all the clothes, that is what I do have and I don't want.
With a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, I know it's not going to happen. Prepare for a while.
It's not going to happen. They don't care. They don't care. They don't even put the caps on their markers.
Yeah,
they dry out. It makes me so sad.
Yeah, you can sing every song about it. They're just
not doing it.
Exactly. Well, is there anything that we didn't cover today, or any message that you want to make sure we end with in this conversation?
You have no idea what you're capable of. Whoever you are that's listening, you have no idea what you're capable of. And I don't mean that like you're ignorant to it. I mean, you are capable of so much more than you probably give yourself credit for. And that's all of us, because the things that we do that are extraordinary, we think are just easy or common. And it's not until somebody else looks at you and says, that thing that you do is extraordinary, that we start to recognize that we have the capacity to do more than we think we can. And I just want people to try on the idea that they're capable of so much more than they currently think they are.
I love it. Very good. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story. There's so many things that I think people will take away from this conversation.
Yeah, it was good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
And now my mindful moments with this interview with Jeff, who was hugely fascinating. I just love this conversation we had about his father and his father's background, of how that impacted him with him being having his own father die when he was young and being adopted by his uncle and aunt, and the impact that made on his life, and just the foresight he had with the draft for Vietnam, that he actually signed up first so that he could have a better decision on where he was going to go. I think a lot of times people react the opposite, that they actually react with, hopefully they don't draft me, or hopefully they don't call my number and my name, and we avoid, versus how can we take control of our outcome. And I think that is a really important lesson, because so many times when I'm coaching people or working with leaders, we sometimes feel that we don't have control of our circumstances. And often we talk about is, what is it that I can control? Where are the things that I can make sure that I make some decisions that will give me the freedom or the empowerment to feel like I am owning my life or owning my decisions? So I think this was a really great example in a little way of being able to take control of your own circumstances and not focus on what you can't control, but what you can control. The other thing that was interesting is, based on that experience, and I think this is so important, because all the things that we do in our life, even if they're not something we enjoy or not something we would have chosen, we can always look backward and say, we understand why we had that experience, because it actually led into the other. And that was really his journey to being a funeral director. And the things that he learned from it was being around death so much, and being around in a role that he felt, that he was not stuck to say, but this is where his experience was, and he dedicated his life to that career, that you really start understanding that you don't know when your time is up, and life is short. And so it is really important that we do something that makes us happy. Now, we talked about this in essence with the job that we do or the work that we do. Doesn't always have to be the work that you do or the job that you do. It can be the things that you enjoy outside of your work, that your job actually gives you the flexibility and the type of life that allows you to be able to have the hobbies that you want, or spend the time with your family, or have the kind of flexibility that you need in your life. So when we can actually shift our focus into what makes us happy, and are we able to find that happiness in our daily life, I think that's really important, to look for those little things that make us happy. Again, what we can control versus what we can't. And in Jeff's father's case, the fact that he had a job that did give him the flexibility to be able to be home with Jeff, to be able to have the flexibility to be the father that he wanted to be, that can be what makes you happy in life. So we don't always have to make it these huge things, that it can be the simple things in life that are what important to us and why we do what we do. The other big lesson that I think was in this was about his basketball career. And I think this was a really important thing about how hard he worked to be able to make his high school basketball team. And every year he didn't make it, which actually changed his trajectory of where his goals were in life. And this is really important, that sometimes, again, we cannot control our circumstances, and those circumstances do shift our life, maybe add a fork in the road that we didn't expect. Now, who knows why that fork in the road happened for Jeff, that he was not going to go down this path that he had hoped to go down as, a younger person, to be able to be a professional basketball player. But there's a reason. And if you can look back at your life, there was lessons that he's learned over time and experiences that he has had that he would have never had he made that basketball team. I don't know, this comes up a lot every once in a while, and not everybody has seen this movie, but there's a movie called Sliding Doors, and it's an older movie. It's probably 20, 30 years old at this point, but a really important movie about Gwyneth Paltrow's in the movie, and if she missed the subway or got on the subway, how different her life was going to be. And they play out both parts. And so it would just be interesting to me. This is a sliding doors moment of whether he got on that basketball team or he didn't get on the basketball team, where would that path have been and where would that have led him in his life? And to me, it taught him so many things about hard work, something he carried with him, but that message that he got just a few months ago from another player on that team that had noticed what had happened, and no one spoke up, no one said anything, and he had been carrying this for so long. And I think this is really important too, that we think about those moments that we didn't speak up. And how can we reach out to someone to let them know that you noticed, or even that there's an apology of not speaking up for whatever your circumstances are. You can forgive yourself for whatever those circumstances are. All those players knew he was getting wrong, but there was nothing they could do. But supporting him, letting him know how well he played, and also that they thought he should have made it, could have given him some justification at the time that he just couldn't make sense of in his head. So all of that is just so interesting of just how these paths happen in our life, but we also learn our work ethic. And from doing what he did, he's learned his work ethic over and over and over again of shooting high, of taking big risks, and having the confidence in himself that he can do that, which really led to the title of this, is that knowing that you don't have limits, that there's never a time, which I talk about in the opening of this podcast. We are never too old. So there's never a time that we have to give up on our dreams or give up on the things that we want and say, oh, that time has passed. It might be something different now, but that time has never passed. We always have the opportunity to find out what is that thing that makes us extraordinary, and how do we uncover that, and what does that mean now? How can we utilize that now in our life to really find that joy in our life, because life is short and we have no idea what we're capable of, like Jeff said. So how do we make sure to really emphasize the things that make us unique, that make us us, no matter how small or large those things are? I want to thank you again for listening to this podcast and supporting us. And it means so much for those of you that leave us comments, subscribe, follow the podcast, because the more that happens, the more it gets out to people everywhere. We are over 140 episodes at this point, and really appreciate all that support over time. And that gives me the momentum to keep going. So thank you for that. And I hope to have you listen to our next guest that will be coming soon. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.